Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Okay, that's good. I'm actually quite quiet, so this is nice. So basically, I'm going to be talking about open worlds in games, and I wasn't sure how much of an introduction was required, so I've given myself a slide, and that's quite narcissistic, and now I know that, but it's there anyway. So I'm Emma. I write for a publication called Gadget. You can find me on Twitter after this if you don't hate me. I love video games, and I am incredibly lazy. So I'm really lazy. Unprecipitated movement is not a thing that really comes naturally to me. I actually begrudge my own body for having functions that require any form of movement. I've been known to say ugh because something's slightly more than an arm's reach away, and it's actually quite disgusting, and I'm a little bit embarrassed about it, but I'm too lazy to fix it, so it's not going to change. So gaming is one of the hobbies that I absolutely love because it allows me to, in a sense, hide my own laziness from myself by letting me go on hundreds of different adventures and seeing different worlds without moving anything further back in my body than my wrists. So I can finish my day and say I slayed a dragon, or I made Alistair fall a little bit more in love with me, or I only died 6 times, and that means that I've definitely done something. But recently I've been finding that rather than appeal to my lazy side, some games have actually made it elicit a long suffering sigh, and that is open world games. So before I go any further, I'm going to say right now, I do love open world games, but we have a complicated relationship. Open world games can be visually stunning. I could spend hours in them and not get bored because there's so much to learn, so many characters to meet, so many perfectly rendered blades of grass to cry over. And it's sometimes nice to have a familiar game world to fall back into when you experience a gaming slump. So if you've not played something new in a while, but you want a game, it can be nice to go, oh, well, I'll just slip back into Skyrim for a few hours. It's familiar and I know that I like it. When you're in a new, large game world, it's exciting to explore when you jump in and you know your feet aren't going to touch the bottom for a while. So I'm going to apologize for my slides here. It's kind of like this, where you're an amazing mermaid and you can go on forever. But sometimes you jump in and you find you've landed in a puddle that's just deep enough that it annoyingly seeps into your shoes, and then you look up and it goes on for fucking miles. So basically I couldn't find a picture that showed this, but I feel like this leaf shows exactly how it feels. It's like worlds that are open just because they can be, because it's the fashionable thing to do, and those are the kinds of worlds that lazy Emma just can't do. Reference the leaf. So they say to you, like, look, you have so much freedom, and you say, to do what? And they say, to embrace the spirit of adventure, and then I leave. So I just really dislike this approach when you find that geographical expansion of a game has come at the loss of depth somewhere else. And for me, a loss of depth elsewhere comes with a loss of incentive to actually explore. So for me, the worst kind of depth to sacrifice for a larger game world is narrative depth. So often there are worlds you can explore, but you don't really have to in order to progress the main storyline, which can be interesting enough in and of itself. So what you'll find is that these games become filled with pointless collectibles to try and draw out that weird dormant completionist gremlin that lies in all of us, to feel like we have to see the rest of the game's map. And this can sometimes leave story-based missions and the rest of the world you're playing in feel quite desperate. There's like a lack of focus. So like in Assassin's Creed 2, when you're running around Florence and you're playing Ezio, you're flooring guards and collecting stupid eagle feathers, you do lose the sense of him as a man facing great personal tragedies as he becomes embroiled in a global conspiracy that needs to be attended to urgently. Because we all know that Templars wait for you to strut your stuff. The map is huge in Assassin's Creed and of course beautiful, but it didn't really have to be. It felt more like they were showing off what they could do with the game system because you can explore Florence than it actually had anything to do with the story. So playing Far Cry Primal was a different but not necessarily better experience for me. So I felt like it justified its large map by having me explore it in order to progress the main story. I was saving people and I was bringing important characters with useful knowledge into my community so that I could help learn from them. The story was the map. It was just a shame then that Far Cry Primal's main story wasn't really strong or interesting enough beyond your own tribe is the best and has to win for me to want to pursue it. And I was left feeling like I was just kind of clearing icons off the map because I had to. Far Cry Primal could have been just ridiculous, aimless fun in a prehistoric setting, but its weak narrative ended up feeling like a bad attempt to put train tracks on the gameplay by locking things like weapons, skills, and tools that would have helped you explore the world into the barely there main narrative. So Far Cry Primal made me want to explore, but locked me into a dull main narrative that didn't make it feel worth it, and Assassin's Creed told me an interesting narrative, but didn't give me much that made me want to explore further. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is to make an open world game with a main story, a balance needs to be struck, and I'm well aware that this is easier to say than it actually is to do. The main story needs to be kept strong enough that players don't lose interest in completing the game and all the stupid things done on the side don't detract from its resonance. But at the same time, the world of the game needs to feel alive and worth exploring, with interesting side missions that aren't repetitive. It's an obvious one considering how many rewards it's won, but The Witcher 3 is one of the best examples of this. You actually get the feeling that the developers established their main story and expanded the world to suit the quests, rather than build a massive world and just fling quests into it in an attempt to bloat content. Sometimes it's a better idea to de-emphasize the core story missions like Fallout and Skyrim. These games have main stories, but you don't have to pursue them because the world is populated with enough interesting side quests and characters that everything feels like something that's worth pursuing. These games work in an open world because the protagonist's story develops through the player and how they interact with the open world, rather than through specific story-based missions. But even then, I've had times playing games like Skyrim where I felt the space of the game world could have been more effectively filled, like in The Witcher. Sometimes what you need is linearity to create a genuinely engaging story and effectively develop characters. So this is not exactly a comprehensive example of linearity, but it's kind of the idea of the arrow is, you go through the game, you cannot touch the rest of it. If you take BioShock Infinite or Uncharted, those worlds feel huge, and when I'm playing them I desperately want to see more, but the narratives are engaging regardless of the world's size, and being able to explore more wouldn't necessarily improve these games in any way. Even maps like Dragon Age, which strike the balance between linear and open, are preferable. There's a reasonably sized area I can explore in detail, and I can do so safe in the knowledge that I'm still progressing the story and I'm not in the area for nothing. Just because systems can handle an open world doesn't mean they have to. And I know that developing these massive worlds and creating their stories takes large teams and even larger amounts of times, but sometimes I just want to consider how these parts connect more. Please keep massive explorable game worlds just as long as their scope is worth my time and doesn't squander the depth of the story to increase gameplay hours and drive completionists to the brink of their sanity. Part of me feels like the growing popularity of open worlds in part comes from this kind of weird congregation of gamers who think that a game is only worth the number of hours they can squeeze out of it and the size of its map. This could be in part because open world games themselves push the largeness of their open worlds as a somewhat superior feature, something that only comes from the fact that they're being developed on new systems and we get advances in technology, which means that we can cope with these things. This could be, I once saw a post online that actually said games shouldn't have fast travel because it breaks immersion, and I was honestly like, who are these people? Like, how do you have the time to spend hundreds of hours in every game that you play? I once had the leisure to pick up an RPG and dedicate hours every day to it for weeks, which was university. But I don't have the time to do that anymore. I don't have time to waste traversing massive maps for no other reason that it's a good way to blow up playtime. And they make me feel like, I don't feel like I've really explored anything. There are ways to do fast travel that integrate it into the game more, like the system in Morrowind, where it's like transport that kind of goes in the game rather than just warping. But I don't really see what's wrong with just filling in the gaps of warping with your imagination. So films and books accept that you have this imaginative capacity, and there's no reasons why games shouldn't. And I hope they never get rid of it. Like, I want fast travel to be a feature in my real life, not to take it out of games and life. Because the thing is, there are so many ways to explore in games that aren't geographical, and that's part of what makes them great. So providing large amounts of content to explore can be a good way to reduce the size of a game world, particularly when it's not just pointless collectibles that are only there for the purpose of gaining an achievement. So if you scale back the geography of a game and fill it with books, creatures, helpful items, weapons for a player to find, they'll enjoy exploring the space because it feels rewarding. I just totally missed the slide, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's my defense for transport. So you explore the space because it feels rewarding. So Pokemon, to me, is a good example of this. So each part of the Pokemon region you explore has special Pokemon, new kinds of Pokeballs, new moves, new items like bikes or fishing rods or whatever to find. The Pokemon world never feels too big because it is so much more than just space to explore. Like, look at this shit. Game mechanics is another area we can explore. So maybe the game has incredibly structured skill trees that truly help us move forward in the game by allowing us to craft our own individual playstyle. Or maybe like FIFA, it's about mastering the best way to structure your team, figuring out which players play well alongside each other and adjusting formations to suit the playstyle and make things difficult for the other side. Or maybe it's just repeatedly facing an enemy to learn the best technique for defeating them. So like, God knows that's how Bloodborne keeps you interested. This method of exploration really makes you feel a sense of achievement in exchange for your time spent. These are just a couple of examples, but to me they all seem like better ways to spend time inside a game than simply walking across a map. I don't want immediate gratification for every step that I take in a game, but I at least want to feel like I've accomplished something after an hour of play. I suppose what I'm saying is, don't get rid of the open worlds because there are plenty of games that do it just right. But just remember that, I know this is such a cliche, size isn't everything, it's what you do with it that counts. Thank you for listening. And